Hello YouTube Pipers, Double O Pipe here, aka Rick. My Savinelli Roma 673 with a bowl full of velvet, and I'm going to try and light this thing. I had a filter in it and it just wouldn't draw through the filter, so I took the filter out. This is a different hat that I found in the hallway there. Thought I'd show it to you. It's a winter hat really, because it's made out of wool, herringbone stitching, a Jackson, but this one fits better. Well, we'll see how that does. How is everybody? Just wanted to report on that June on the Range book that I'm reading, the long arm book. It's definitely not Louis L'Amour. Louis L'Amour's story is, I think, more of a 50s Western movie in the theater. This seems more like a TV series that's devoted to sex more than story. I'm 10 pages in and already we're in the middle of that, and I'm not sure if that's what I want to read. If I want a Western, I want to know what's out west, not what's in the back room. Though I know that's part of the West, but still, I want a real story. I don't know, I don't think I've got that cherry in there, as they call it. Well, I was going to talk to you about the year 1985. I had moved back up here from Pensacola, and a divorce had been filed, and I started work in a local hospital. I always preferred the hospital pharmacy because there's so many different things you can do. Whereas in a drugstore, you're just standing typing. In the hospital, you were a little more active. Well, in 1985, the divorce had come through, and for the last 2 years, I had been anxious and nervous and whatever you want to call it. And I had gotten stomach pains that I could not stop. I would take a bottle of Mylanta off the shelf and drink half of it. And still I was in pain. And if you ever have a bowel movement that's like tar, you know you got some bleeding in the upper area somewhere up here. So remember that, in case that ever happens to you. First time it happened to me, I was here by myself, and I got through it and just didn't tell anybody, which probably wasn't too bright. And about a week after that, I was at work, and the area that I was in this particular time was the IV area, where we fixed IV medicines for the patients on the floor. And this was a specialized IV. It's called a hyperalimentation. We had a special hood that we had to mix the ingredients under that had filtered air blowing towards us, which kept, and there was a screen, and our arms fit under the screen, so that that was the cleanest area that we had, so that we could make this without being too concerned about germs. Excuse me, I got a beer here, so anyway, these particular IV fluids go directly into an artery that goes directly into the heart, because it needs a heavy flow of blood to mix this concentrated solution in. So that's why we have to be extremely careful when we mix it. You don't want to introduce germs into the heart, that's for sure. Depending on how many patients are on this particular IV, it could take 2 hours to 6 hours to mix them all up. And the first thing you had to do was type up the labels. This particular day, I hadn't been feeling too good. Pain in my stomach was really giving me a problem. And I'd already drunk my half bottle of Mylanta and had it by my side. And I started typing up my labels for these IV fluids. And in the middle of one of the labels, I had an extreme pain in my stomach. And I was drenched in cold sweat, and I was slumping over the typewriter. And I slid out of the chair and fell on the floor. Now, the areas that we worked, we had several people working it at the time, are all kind of cut off from one another by high walls with drugs sitting in them and such. So nobody had seen that, except one of my workmates came walking by and stepped over me. And I asked her later why she had done that, why she hadn't stopped to help me. And she said, "I thought you were looking for your pencil." But anyway, she was out the door before I could say anything, because I could barely talk. And I couldn't see anybody, and I knew I was in trouble. So I pulled the phone down to the floor where I was and dialed the secretary up front. And she answered it, and I whispered into the phone, "Help me," and passed out. Well, when she looked back there and realized it was me and I was on the floor and I wasn't talking, she called and had the crash cart, which is the cart that they bring to emergency situations. And 2 of them came up to the pharmacy. We were on the 9th floor in this particular hospital. Usually they're in the basement, but we were lucky. We had a great view on the 9th floor. They came in, and like I said, I was out, and they put me on a gurney and took me down to ICU. figured I had an ulcer that had burst. And I'm not sure when they did it, but they had a doctor come in and go down into my stomach with a wire and cauterize. I had two ulcers, two bleeding ulcers down there. Cauterized both of them. Stopped them bleeding. Hooked me up to blood. I think they gave me five bags of blood. That's 5 pints, I think, because I had lost a lot of blood. That's the reason I had just passed out, white as a sheet. And the day after that, they came down to visit. And the worst thing you can do to somebody that's just had their stomach ulcers cauterized is make them laugh, which is, we always do that to each other. We try to crack each other up. So they were cracking me up, and I was doubled over asking them, please don't do that. Please don't do that. Because I couldn't stop laughing. So the nurse kicked them out. And it took a while to get over that. I had to take some medical leave to get over that, heal up. And for the longest time, I didn't know what I could eat and what I couldn't eat. I mean, they told me, but I was just afraid that it would happen all over again and they would pop and I'd be bleeding on the inside again. But I got through it. Everybody was very helpful. The girl that stepped over me and went to the bathroom said she was sorry. She didn't realize I was having a problem. Funny now. Back then I thought I was dying. Wasn't able to say anything to her. She walked out the door. That's the first and last time I went into the hospital for an emergency situation like that. All I can say is it was a good thing I was working in a hospital pharmacy, because if I'd been in one of those drugstores, I'd have just been laying on the floor back there and people asking where the chicken livers were, because that's what it was like when I worked in a drugstore. I worked in a grocery store that had a drugstore, and that's the main question they had. Where are the chicken legs? Where can I find this? Where can I find that? Nothing to do with pharmacy. But I was really glad that I had been working in a hospital. I'd have really been in trouble, because they would have had to send for an ambulance. I could have been bleeding out by the time the ambulance got there. But since I was at the hospital itself, and emergency room was like 8 floors down, they took the elevator down, I was okay. But my fellow worker got razzed quite a bit for just stepping over me and walking through the door. I don't think Larry was working there at that particular time. He came later. I have other stories about that place that I'll come to another time. But that's my medical warning to you guys. If you have a BM that's like tar, you've got some internal bleeding up here somewhere. Word to the wise. The brighter red it is, the closer it is to your rectum. Well, so much for the day. Hope everybody's doing fine. Weekend's coming up. It looks nice out here today. It's sunny. It's about 80 degrees. We've been having a lot of rain. I've been having a lot of flooding. But that's something you have to get used to when you live here. I might get on here later and talk about another story. I kind of enjoy telling stories. And you guys tell me you enjoy them, so I don't know. I don't know if you enjoy this one or not. For me, it was, now looking back, it's funny, that girl walking over me. But I have a story of another fellow who was sitting there typing up labels for hyperalimentations, and the boss got involved in that one. And the boss was a prankster, so you can imagine. Anyway, hope all you're doing well. Hope you have a good weekend. I'll probably see you again sometime. Take care of yourself, and God bless.